When I met Nathan at JFK Airport in New York, I hardly recognized him. It had been over 3 years since I'd seen him last, and now here he was at 17, looking like a little gangster. He wore baggy, low-rider jeans exposing the top of his boxer shorts. Apparently this was hip-hop fashion, although there are other theories where this ugly trend began. The prison system seems to be the most favoured. He also wore a baseball cap sideways on his head. This was certainly not the cute, handsome little boy I remembered, but I loved him just the same. We were both excited to see one another and hugged for the longest time. Back in Newtown, we were welcomed by one of the 2 large cream-coloured Samoyed dogs that belonged to my landlords. This was Gumbo, who was the friendliest of the 2 dogs. Chowder, also named after a hearty bowl of soup, was the other dog. Both of them lived outdoors, which really bothered me, especially during the winter. However, since they were from Siberia and similar to huskies, they did apparently fare well in the cold. The only problem was that Gumbo was afraid of thunder and lightning, which I found out not long after I'd moved into the cottage. The landlords, Alan and Vicky, were away at their property in Nova Scotia, and although they usually kept the dogs locked in a large kennel opposite my cottage, with Chowder actually spending all of his time there, they'd somehow forgotten to put Gumbo in the kennel. As a clap of thunder shook the cottage, I thought lightning had also struck when there was an almighty wham at my kitchen door, which scared the heck out of me. Pumpkin leapt into the air with fright as well. When I ventured into the kitchen to investigate, I was shocked to see the large, terrified face of Gumbo standing at the window with outspread paws, pleading to be let in, which of course I did. He shivered with fear as I tried to towel off the rain and dirt from his long and unkempt coat. Then he licked my hands in gratitude and lay down on the floor next to Pumpkin, who was somewhat cautious, but he seemed to understand that the dog was in distress. He didn't mind sharing his cat food with him either. Gumbo spent the whole night with us, and from then on we were the best of friends. Unfortunately, Alan and Vicky were not at all happy that I'd allowed this beautiful dog inside the cottage. I was supplied with a gadget that I was told to put next to the inside of the back door. I had no idea what it was, but I soon found out when Gumbo attempted to knock on my door again. He was now wearing a collar that interacted with this harmless-looking gadget, and when the dog got close to the door, he received an almighty electric shock. Oh, it was awful. I was horrified that the owners would do such a cruel thing to this lovely animal, and I soon disposed of it, although I made sure it was visible whenever the landlords were around. Regardless of this horrible, electrifying experience, Gumbo was always excited whenever I arrived home, and extended this warm welcome to Nathan, who also became very fond of the dog. I showed Nathan around the cottage and took him to his room, which had a 4-poster bed, impressing him greatly. "Just like Vegas," he declared, referring to the room I always stayed in at the Riviera Hotel when I used to visit Nathan there a few years previously. Before we said goodnight, he hugged me tightly again, told me he loved me, and fluttered his long eyelashes on my cheek. He was giving me butterfly kisses, just as he did when he was a child. It was cute, but a little odd, since he was now practically an adult. Later, when I was almost asleep, he jumped on my bed. "Can I sleep with you, please?" "Nathan, you're a young man now. It's not appropriate." Oh, but I just want to cuddle like we used to, and when you used to tickle me. I realized that this young man, who had experienced too many hard times for his age, was anxious to relive the happy times we'd had together. It took me back when he was 9 years old. We were watching a video of the Disney film Fantasia on television, and he turned to me and said, "Marie, I never want to grow up. I just want life to stay like this, to be just like this." It brought a lump to my throat then, and it does now. It was December 2003, and in the first few weeks of Nathan's arrival, we did a lot of sightseeing in New York and meeting up with my friends who all loved Nathan. My Greek-American friend Penny had been very close to the World Trade Center on September the 11th, 2001, and recalled her terrifying experience, which brought tears to Nathan's eyes. I'd visited Penny a few months after 9/11, and she told me that a temporary viewing platform had recently been erected overlooking what was now called Ground Zero. She thought it was macabre and had absolutely no interest in joining me to view the remnants of the site of the horrendous terrorist attacks. I have to admit it did seem sacrilegious, and I almost felt ashamed to be there as I stood on the viewing platform along with so many other people and looked at the devastation below. But the atmosphere was like nothing I'd ever experienced. It was so quiet, apart from the faint sound of machinery, where workers were no longer searching for survivors, but for body parts. I'll never forget the eerie, church-like silence and reverence of everyone on the viewing platform. This also extended to people looking at thousands of photos of the missing, posted on large boards. It really did feel like a holy place, and certainly a lot of prayers were being said for all those poor souls who lost their lives. In December 2003, Nathan wanted to visit Ground Zero, although I was reluctant. It almost felt like an intrusion. As it happens, there was very little to see, since the whole area was boarded up and in the process of being restructured. Nevertheless, Nathan was profoundly impacted, just as I had been 2 years earlier. But life goes on. The next day we went to a Christmas tree farm, and Nathan cut down our very own tree, which he thought was cool. We had a lovely Christmas together, decorating the tree and the cottage, as well as joining Kathy and Stu Linda at their beautiful home for dinner. New Year's Eve was spent at the top of the Empire State Building. It was all very magical, albeit very cold. With the coming of the new year, it was time to make plans and get back to reality. At my nudging, Nathan found a part-time job at a movie theatre in Danbury, the biggest town close by. I dropped him off and picked him up the first couple of days he worked, but thankfully he made a friend who lived in nearby Sandy Hook. Tony had a car and the same shifts as Nathan, so it worked out great. And Nathan now had a friend and a job. Kathy Linda was directing Light Up the Sky at the Richfield Theatre Bar not far from Newtown, and she asked if I'd like to take the role of Nan, the ghostwriter in the play. I hadn't appeared on the stage since a year or two before, when I played the role of Aunt Julie in Hedda Gabler at the Cast Theatre in Hollywood. So I was flattered that she asked me to be part of her production. The barn had tables and chairs in a dinner theatre setting, except there were no wait staff. Theatre-goers brought their own food and drink. Consequently, by the time the show started, the audience were usually in good spirits. It was fun, as theatre always is, and I met some lovely people. Barry and Tom Fontana were in the process of getting another TV show off the ground for Warner Brothers. But in the meantime, Barry asked me to work with him on a new script called What Just Happened, which was to star Robert De Niro. Nathan wasn't doing too well at his movie theatre job, and after only 2 weeks, he and his pal decided to call it a day, with no other prospects immediately available. I knew that Nathan had a problem with authority figures, so wondered if he'd ever be able to hold down a job. Next time, another TV role for me, and Nathan, the up-and-coming rap star. Thanks for listening.